as usual. Friends, as you know, we completed our webinar on Master Series on the Companies Act. And it was almost how many episodes, Sudhakar?
32.
32 we had. So several months we run that. And it was uploaded and appreciated all over India, not only in India, out of country also. Some places we visited, they appreciated. And they say that whenever we have some clarification or we have doubt, we go to your webinar session and then we work on it and we get the answers. So thanks friends for your coordination, that appreciation, and lot of effort has gone from Mehta and Mehta. We feel happy when this kind of appreciation we got, and acknowledgement that people appreciate, they go and they get really benefited. Friends, the intention is here to talk, explore, and increase the knowledge of each and every participant, including ourselves. We ourselves are get benefited a lot. So that is the thing. And we have a panelist who are so passionate and always share their experience, knowledge. So grateful to all the panelists who has been there in our entire this series. Who has joined our webinar. I really from heart thank all the panelists and all the participants for their support. Now today we have for 3 webinars, we are going to have a different topic which is important. And then after New Year, we are coming out with new series. That will be little suspense. 2-3 topics are there. We are exploring, but it will come. And today's topic, we are coming with the very hot as on today. The recent amendment, Sebi, LODR, third amendment regulations. And I know friends, everyone, it's looks small but has impact, and everyone would like to know what kind of impact or impression it will leave and what has the impact on execution. And we have with us to discuss none other than Ms. Prajakta Paule, Company Secretary of NSE itself. Thanks, Prajakta. You are coming second, I think, more than 2 times. Thanks a lot for your interest and time, dear. Thanks a lot. And Prajakta Paule, to formally introduce, is a currently Company Secretary of NSE. She has around 18 years of experience with reputable corporates like L&T Technology, Reliance Industries, JSW Group, Times Group, and BSC Limited. During her association with this company, she has consistently exhibited comprehensive knowledge in secretarial and compliance functions. Being a commerce graduate, Prajakta stood All India rank 7 in the CS final exam conducted by ICSI and has completed her LLB from GLC Mumbai. I am also GLC Mumbai, Prajakta. Thanks. So, friends, Prajakta Paule, thanks a lot, Prajakta. Friends, our today's presenter is Ms. Ashwini Inanda, Senior Partner, Mehta and Mehta. Ms. Ashwini is a fellow member of ICSI, has a master's in law, overall experience with 15 years. She started her career with listed company Cummins India Limited. She is at present Senior Partner, Mehta and Mehta Company Secretary. And she is handling portfolio of 300 plus clientele, including top 100 listed companies. She is specialized in LODR and has a vast experience in matters relating to listing agreement, takeover act and takeover code, Companies Act, and she is a certified POS trainer and regularly trained corporate, including SBI for insider trading regulation and listing regulations. She is also certified CSR professional from ICSI. Thank you, Ashwini. As usual, we have with us our own Mr. Sudhakar Sarvatula, who doesn't need introduction. He has told me now not to introduce, and our own Mr. Bala. People has read his articles like anything. Welcome you both. Now I'll request Ms. Prajakta to say a few words on the topic, then Sudhakar, then Bala, and we can start as early as possible. Thank you. Over to Prajakta.
Thank you, madam. Thank you for the brief introduction. To start with the topic, it's first of all a pleasure to be on this platform. Yes, it is my second time, and it is a mutually enriching experience for me to share insights, and it is also a learning experience, because every time I come here, it's not that only I share my insights. It's also a learning experience, because the kind of insights I gain from not only when I participate, but also from the kind of the discussions that you guys have here. Also, the fact that you people upload these sessions on YouTube. So in case I miss these sessions on online platform, I ensure to get the bites of these sessions from the YouTube sessions. So it's always helpful. So all those people who miss these, I always encourage them that they should look at the YouTube sessions that you people upload. So that's a wonderful thing that you guys are doing for the profession. That's what. So, talking of today's topic, I thought that yes, it's an important update that has recently been brought in. The amendment circular, it's a 43-pager document, effective 31st December 2024. There are around 36 regulations which have been amended, and there are two schedules amended. There are around regulations, many regulations, so to say, 36 regulations amended, but I think there are 8 to 10 regulations which, as professionals, we all need to take important notes. And briefly, yes, many forums, social media, and many people have been talking about briefly about company compliance officers, company secretaries' roles being elevated. Also, things like practicing company secretaries appointments being equated to statutory auditors. So yes, it is an elevation to those kinds of things. Related party transactions also, there is a change. Also some disclosure norms, there are changes. So let's go through the presentation that Ashwini will be talking about.
Okay, thank you. Sudhakar, please.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Prajakta, for coming from this platform. In fact, some of the participants, I must take pride of Prajakta, because I could see her 18 years. She grown professionally in front of my eyes, because she joined 18 years before as a trainee when I was working with Reliance, and after that she worked with me for about 8 years or so, if I am not wrong. Then she has ventured out, and today she has reached to this position. In fact, whenever your children grow like this in front of your eyes, you will feel very happy. And the same is my feeling also, Prajakta. You
Thank
have
you, sir.
grown 18 years in front of my eyes. It's very good, and I keep it up that thing. At the same point of time, I must also thanks to Ashwini. The moment I saw why can't we take up this particular topic, immediately she has accepted that challenge and she has made the presentation, and we could discuss to some extent, but definitely the clarity on certain aspects are yet to come. But we are going to have to start with, and over a period of time, we'll get mature. At the
Right.
same point of time, I always used to have a complaint with the regulators. Why they have to amend so many things? In fact, when I was looking back, every year on an average, we have 5 amendments right from 2015 onwards. But only good part of this year is this is the only third amendment. Otherwise, if you see previous 3 years, 6 amendments were there in 2023, 2022, 2021. Prior to that, 5 amendments were there. Even as Prajakta has mentioned, 48 amendments are there in this present third amendment of this listing regulations. Had they removed these cosmetic changes, it would have come down to almost one third of that, whatever it is there. Second thing is they're just bringing before the year closure. Okay. So today we are on 21st, and another 10 days we are going to have our new year. People are in a vacation mode. They brought this thing. Always it used to happen like that with the regulators. And once you come back from the vacation, you have your board meeting pressure. And that point of time, you have to understand this 48 pages document. What is going to affect you? What is not going to affect you? So this is one part of it. I don't know why the regulators keep about all these cosmetic changes, comma, full stops, removal of inverted commas, and all take at one point of time. Anyway, that we can't help that thing. We have given some suggestions in the past. I'm sure if any regulators or in fact Prajakta may use her good office at any opportune time to do these kind of changes. Now, come no doubt about it, this particular amendment has given a great flip to our profession, especially the secretarial auditor, the appointment. Since long, actually, we were craving for this. It is also to be done by the shareholders at the annual general meeting. And now that dream come true today. Similarly, that regulation 6, if you see, the compliance officer is to be a qualified company secretary. That point of time itself, I used to say that he should be in the whole time employment of the company, because the moment when you say he should be a qualified company secretary means he need not be in the employment of the company. So a secondment is also allowed. Now, several people used to ask this question whether they have to have the company secretary who is the compliance officer. In the group companies, they might be on the secondment basis. Whether they have to be in the employment of the company, answer is yes. And of course, we will discuss all those things. Fortunately, what they did was they have not left any ambiguity that the secretarial auditor, as on date, whatever the past, how many years he was doing the secretarial audit, that is not going to be counted. So next to 10 years, wherever you want to be, you can continue to that. Not necessarily you have to vacate that particular position. That is a good part. Unlike the statutory auditors, when 2013 Companies Act was legislated, in case of statutory auditors, what they did was whatever the tenure of the auditor, it was counted for the purpose of this 10 years. Fortunately, in our case, it is not so. That's a blessing in disguise. It's a great boost for our this thing. At the same point of time, this secretarial compliance certificate, it is to be signed either by the secretarial auditor or by a peer-reviewed PCS. This is also another good thing according to me. So like this, there are so many things out there. So there is no doubt these amendments are going to enhance the corporate governance to a large extent, not only ease of compliance, but also the cost of compliance. If you see that the hard copies of the annual reports, you don't need to circulate now. Earlier, what happened was the people who have not registered their email IDs, to them, you were supposed to send the hard copies. Whereas now, you have to send a simple letter to them, giving the QR code or whatever it is, and say that, in the website, this is there. Only those people who are asking for the annual report, you have to send it. Otherwise, you don't need to do it. So obviously, companies will be sending a lot of print cost of the annual reports, lot of postage cost. This is going to be a saving. Like that, there are some good points out there. When Ashwini is making the presentation, we will discuss it further. So I'll give a pause here and request Bala to take it forward.
Good morning to all of you. I have a great pleasure in welcoming you all for today's seminar. And in fact, if you look at the people who have joined so far, that itself shows what is the importance of this particular amendment which has actually come into. And really speaking, I have nothing to add because Ashwini is actually going to take us through all the topics, and we have the panelists to add whenever any clarification, etc., doubts are there actually. But the only thing is, I would say, whatever the recent amendment which has come in the Sebi LODR regulations, that has brought very, very significant towards strengthening the corporate governance practices, and also at the same time enhancing the transparency and moreover improving the compliance actually with the listed companies. That is what they have actually achieved to this. And especially what they have done is they have refined related party transactions, which is Ashwini is going to discuss with us. And also they have actually brought changes in respect to board and audit committee disclosure. And as Mr. Sudhakar said, in secretarial audit, they have more or less brought in line with the statutory auditors, appointment the five terms at a time, not more than 2 times, cooling period, etc. And all this. That's a great thing what they have actually done in case of the secretarial auditor. So really speaking, by these amendments, what Sebi has done is Sebi has actually achieved the balance. One side, simplifying the regulatory processes, and the other side, enhancing the strong supervision at the same time. That is what they have actually done. I think these changes definitely will take a very, very, progressive approach, evident greater accountability and transparency for protecting the shareholders at the same time. I think we as the company secretaries have a lot of things to understand and interpret and know what exactly the thing. That is our job, which is going to be a little tougher time. which might take time as we travel along. Any amendments comes immediately. Once we start giving the implement, then only we realize the pros and cons of the thing. That we will have to actually see. Today is a good beginning. Immediately after the amendments have come, we are discussing. That's a very good point. So I think largely everybody will get benefited. As usual, I request all of you to put your queries and doubts, etc., in the chat box, and we will be taking it periodically, and we will discuss the things at the end of the session. Probably we will permit you raise your hands. You can actually voice your says. Heads up to all of you. I can see Dipti, more than 400 people are there already. We are crossed now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Ashwini. You
Go
can
on, Ashwini, please.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to take you through the presentation, but before that, I would like to thank, and I'm fortunate to be a part of Mehta and Mehta, which is one of the first firms to go through these amendments, and fortunate to be a part of panel wherein Sudhakar sir, Dipti madam, Bala sir, Prajakta is a part, and to the best of my ability, I would like to discuss what are the amendments today. So for the sake of clarity, what I've done is I've clubbed certain provisions together. So it would not be like a word by word amendment discussion, but I would like to discuss what has come in the director's provisions, what is there for secretarial audit, what is there in definition portion. Likewise, I have segregated. Just be patient with me, and I will just go through all the provisions that are there in the amendment. The first I would like to discuss is the definitions part, wherein first definition that has been omitted from the Sebi amendment is the half-year definition. The definition has completely been amended, omitted from the amendment. Second is the securities law. It has been an addition in the securities law definition, where the earlier definition means the Act, Securities Contract Act, Depositories Act, and rules and regulations made thereunder, and the general or special orders, guidelines, or special circulars or issued by the board, and the provisions of the Companies Act, or any previous company law and any subordinate legislation framed thereunder, which are administered by the board. So the words that are written in red are the addition in the definition. Another important definition that has been added is the special SR equity shares. Means the equity shares of a listed entity having superior voting rights compared to all other equity shares issued by the listed entity. So this definition was not a part of the LODR amendments, but has been now added in the definition section. I would like to further state that all the amendments have become effective immediately, except the secretarial auditor requirement, which will be applicable from 1st of April 2025, and the disclosure related, which will be applicable from the December quarter. Next important definition that has been amended is the material subsidiary, which earlier had the word income or net worth exceeds 10% of the consolidated income or net worth. Here the word income has been replaced by the word turnover. So as I said earlier, I have clubbed all the provisions, wherein now we will speak about what are the amendments with respect to directors related. The first amendment.
Ashwini, 1 minute before you go further, as far as the date of enforcement is concerned, there are two dates are there for this. Number one, these regulations have already come into force from 12th of December.
12th of
That is the date of notification, right?
Yes.
There are two regulations which are going to come into force from 31st of December 2024.
Yes.
One is Regulation 13, that is the listed entities which were to file on quarterly basis a statement detailing the redressal of investor grievances.
Yes.
Okay, so now a separate form is going to be prescribed for this purpose, as well as the timelines also by Sebi.
Yes,
so
sir.
that's why this particular regulation the amendment will come into force from 31st December. The second one is about the corporate governance report, which we used to file on for this thing on a quarterly basis under Regulation 27. That is also again the same thing. The SEBI is going to come with a, I think, separate format again, and also the timelines. So that is also that particular regulation. This amendment also is going to come from 31st December only. These are the two
And so
amendments.
Yes,
Of
yes.
course, secretarial audit, as you rightly said. Yeah.
And for the corporate governance provisions, the applicability, the word or has been replaced by and, wherein if your equity share capital or net worth reduces and remains below threshold period for a period of 3 years, then corporate governance provisions do not apply. That word or has been replaced with the word and. So first is directors related amendments. So the timeline or the time limit for filling of vacancies in board committees. So if there is any vacancy in any of the board committee, that is the audit committee or NRC, RMC, due to vacation of office of board of directors, and it results in non-compliance of LODR, it can be filled within 3 months from the date of such vacancy. Further, if such vacancy in the board arises due to expiration of term, you have to ensure that the vacancy is filled before the expiration of term of board of directors. So here now we understand that if any vacancy is created other than expiration of term, it can be filled within 3 months. But if it is due to expiration of term, it has to be filled before the before the director remits the office. So this is an amendment that has been brought in, but this provision will not apply where vacancy in office of director does not lead to non-compliance at board committees. Second is a person nominated by a financial sector regulator or a court or a tribunal will no longer require shareholders' approval. So these directors can be directly nominated on the board. Board will have to take a note, but will not require a shareholder approval. The third amendment is the appointment or reappointment of a managing director, whole-time director, or a manager whose resolutions were rejected by the shareholders earlier. Now they will have to be appointed only with the prior approval of the shareholders. Another important, though recommendatory but important amendment is that appointment of women independent director has been extended to top 1,000 to 2,000 companies, but it is recommendatory as of now. Next is Sebi has made it compulsory for the listed entities to obtain a special resolution prior to appointment or reappointment of non-executive directors on attaining the age of 75 years. So we will have to pass a special resolution prior to appointment or a reappointment of NED on attaining the age of 75. The amendment in the said regulation is clarificatory in nature to ensure that special resolution is moved before the shareholders prior to the directors attaining the age of 75 and not after the director has attained the said age. So prior approval is required. So your approval shall be in place before the director turns 75. So Dhaka sir, would you want to say
Yeah,
anything?
in fact, I would like to say there are two discretionary requirements which have been changed. One is that the top 1,000 to 2,000 listed companies, the appointment of woman director, that is the recommendatory as on date, but it is always advisable to have that thing, the companies which are going to fall into this particular thing, because this indicates the mindset of Sebi. Very soon they're going to make it mandatory. So it is always better you get equipped with, because especially the companies which are going to be on the borderline of the 1,000. Today you may not be there, just tomorrow you may be there. So it is always better equipped to do that. And same is the case with the risk management. The committee also. Better to have the RMC committee in place, get accustomed and attuned to the compliance of the provisions. So when the transitional phase, you won't have any kind of hiccups, and the transition will be very smooth. Yeah.
Here, I must say that that woman director implementation and the push from the government and authority is quite commendable as compared to the other developed countries, and its implementation is comparatively good in India. That we should take proud actually.
Now, in fact, when we are talking about the women empowerment, what we normally do is when the March month comes, we immediately start celebrating Women Day celebration, etc. We wish each other great celebrations there. But when it's really come to the women empowerment, how far we are actually seriously enough? I know in many companies, barring a very few companies, because the woman director is required only a minimum, whatever the statutory, that is what. In fact, in my opinion, women can contribute a lot in the corporate world, and we should actually give the women, participation more. Encouragement should be there. As our Sudhakar said, although it is today mandatory, today recommendatory, it is going to be a mandatory. Why to wait for the mandatory? It has to come voluntarily within the organization. That is what I would actually say.
Okay. Thank you. So, yeah.
Yes, so we have completed with respect to directors. Now we will move on to the next amendment, that is with respect to compliance officer of listed companies. The
Can we take questions of directors together or all together at the end we will take? Sudhakar and Prajakta, what you feel?
I think let the flow go for some more time, Deepthi. After that, we will take up.
Okay, okay. Yes, Ashwini, please go ahead.
So now the compliance officer of a listed company should now be a whole-time employee, one level below the board, and someone who is designated as a key managerial personnel. Now there are a lot of questions that come with respect to this amendment, saying that then whether the direct reporting of compliance officer will become to, for any purposes, will go to the board. So we had a discussion, and even Sudhakar sir is of the view that the reporting with respect to the laws or the compliances of the company will always be to the board, even with the PIT regulations, that is the same. But however, with respect to the admin or any other specific purpose, the reporting can be to the internal structure, that is the CEO or anything. But for the purpose of reporting, that is of the compliances and laws, it will always remain to the board. So the hierarchy of the organization, he may be one level below, but reporting can be discussed internally by the listed company and decided. Earlier, compliance officer was required to be only a qualified company secretary, and therefore this option available for the listed entity to designate company secretary from its group company as a compliance officer. But now this has to be a whole-time employee and one level below the board.
Yeah. See that earlier what used to happen was the compliance officer, though he is a qualified company secretary, but the reporting requirement was not to the board directly. So he was reporting some companies to the CFO, some companies to the CEO, some companies to the managing director, like that. So there was always a kind of pressure on the compliance officer to, with all due regards, maybe to compromise to certain aspects as far as the compliances of listing regulations are concerned. That is one reason actually, if you see insider trading regulations, as Ashwini has rightly mentioned, there the compliance officer has to report directly to the board or to the audit committee if the board so decides. Because audit committee normally monitors the insider trading regulation compliances are concerned. In such case, or he has to report directly to the audit committee. Whereas in this case, listing regulations, that kind of requirement was not there. According to me, this is a great initiative by Sebi, making the compliance officer directly report to the board, because he don't need to hesitate if anything is not happening. He should be able to inform to at the board meetings that look, these kind of constraints are there. And and then the second question comes is that several people used to ask that whether we have to change our organograms. The company secretary, suppose not every time, he is in a senior level. How about that thing? If you are to bring in the parity with all that very senior people level, suppose at the president level and all. Answer is not administrative point of view, whatever the organization decides. Administrative organogram may be different to that of the legal organogram. What here says is, as far as the listing regulations are concerned, the compliance officer who has been appointed to ensure the compliances of listing regulations, his reporting as far as this particular compliance requirements are concerned to the board directly. That doesn't mean he has to report even administratively also to the board. It is not so. That's what my interpretation as far as this amendment is concerned. Second thing, as I have mentioned earlier, that in the group companies, normally what used to happen is that the company secretaries, where there are by more than maybe 10, 20, 30, 40 company secretaries, they are working in the group. Whereas their appointment used to be on the parent company and they used to be or deputed on the secondment basis to the other companies. And the parent company used to charge by way of a debit note or whatever it is, and compliance with the related party transactions also, wherever that related party relationship is there. Whereas now, as per this thing, that secondment things cannot happen, because he is that whatever the listed companies are there, you have to have the compliance officer's appointment in that company only. Not only the appointment, he has to be also designated as KMP. That is another requirement also is there. So, of course, most of the companies now only are already following this. So this amendment won't disturb the apple cart as such. But wherever some kind of this kind of things are not there directly, they may have to have some kind of change. This mostly happens for conglomerates like Tata, Birlas, Reliance, Mahindras, and all these kind of group company, Adani's, big groups. This kind of effect may be there. But as far as the standalone companies, small group of companies, this may not have that kind of an impact as such. Yeah.
So,
Prajakta, if you want to make any other
yeah.
comment.
Sir, I would like to add one more point here. Sir, there actually this what is mentioned on this slide is absolutely correct, and I agree with all the points that you mentioned about the administrative reporting of the compliance officer in an organization. And yes, in spirit, the reporting of the compliance officer needs to be to the board of directors. Uh, in fact, I would also like to add one more point here. As the amendment in Regulation 6 also needs to be read in consonance to Regulation 5 amendment. So the earlier Regulation 5 mentioned that the listed entity needed to ensure that KMPs, directors, promoters, etc. need to ensure that that all these people comply with the responsibilities given under LODR. That was the uh, obligation of the listed entity. Now there is one proviso added to Regulation 5 by this amendment, which says that the KMPs, directors, promoters, etc. need to ensure that they disclose to the listed entity. So somewhere in Regulation 5, by giving this proviso, there is an obligation cast on these KMPs, including the compliance officer, to disclose information which is relevant and necessary to ensure compliance of that listed entity. So what I'm trying to say here is that in addition to the compliance officer's obligations which are given under Section 205 of Companies Act, also LODR is trying to give an obligation on the KMP or the compliance officer or the board member or who is responsible for compliance under LODR, that he also is under an obligation that he cannot hold back some information which he is aware. So Regulation 5 and 6 need to be read in tandem.
Yeah, I would like to say that, this compliance officer should now be full-time employee, one level below the board. Yeah, there are comments that as on today, it is not one level below. It's very clearly saying as regards the role of compliance officer, because board look to the CS or compliance officer, as you say, to ensure that all the compliances of companies like LODR are complied with, and they should report it. And if there is a deviation, if there is a, as Sudhakar was telling, it should be direct reporting to the board, not deviation that put a mail to the senior and that I have performed the duty. It will be like a onus on a CS, and that's why there is a direct communication. And CS or compliance officer are in the board meeting. So you are not there only just to say, but you are there to ensure the board that yes, there is a compliance. And that's why this, you can say clarity, but it also clarity on your responsibility. That is more I am looking as such, that it is your responsibility to disclose to the board and board to the members. So if as a compliance officer, you fail to disclose, because you are personally responsible, no choice you have, you are individually responsible. That way we can say it is a big onus on the compliance officer as well. Yeah, please.
I think we have a lot of questions on this point.
I see.
Now you may take up, Bala.
Yeah. the changes of the appointment of the secretary and other rules and regulation should have rightly come in the Companies Act itself rather than in the LODR. What is the response from the panelist?
Yeah, see, one thing is there always listing regulations vis-a-vis the Companies Act. Listing regulations, especially the companies which are listed on the stock exchanges. So SEBI always say that we have to handle the companies and the compliance requirements are on the higher pedestal. That doesn't mean in the case of Companies Act it is not required so, because Companies Act deals with private companies, small companies, dormant companies, all types of companies. So Companies Act requirements are keeping the Ministry of Corporate Affairs requirements, whereas listed companies listing regulations are concerned, because SEBI is handling the companies which are listed on the stock exchanges, where the public has invested the money in the companies. So because of that, once your company is a listed company, you have to comply with both Companies Act as well as the listing regulations also. Whichever the compliance on the higher pedestal, you have to ensure that compliance.
You're absolutely correct, Sudhakar, because as you rightly said, all the companies are incorporated under the Companies Act, whereas the listed companies are regulated in addition to the Companies Act listing agreement. So naturally, they will have the different rules and regulations which are applicable to the larger public interest. As you rightly say, that is correct, because there is no point in discussing this has to be there. Wherever it is harmonized, it is harmonized. Wherever they require the little stringent regulation, it is bound to be there. Yeah. SS1 lays down 4 meetings in a calendar year, whereas the LODR talks about the financial year in the board report. What should be considered?
Projector, take up this.
Yeah, just a minute, sir. Let me read the question again.
SS1 lays down 4 meetings in a calendar year. LODR talks about financial year in the board report. What should be considered?
See, ultimately, whether you read 4 meetings in a calendar year or in a financial year, the meaning comes out to be the same, because calendar year would mean January to December. Financial year would mean April to March. So whether you follow April to March as your financial year or Jan to December, the quarters would mean April to June, July to so yeah, September and those kinds of things. So I think it would hardly make a difference for a company. So
see, not only that,
yeah,
in the Companies Act, if I am not wrong,
huh,
it talks about 4 board meetings in a calendar year.
huh.
And SS1 is in alignment with Companies Act. That's why in SS1 also, it is calendar year only is mentioned. And till recently, in case of listing regulations, they have used the word year.
Year.
And we were more or less taking that as a calendar year only. But now they say it is financial year. Okay. But as Prajakta has rightly mentioned, whether it is a financial year or a calendar year, once in a quarter, you have to have a meeting. So more or less that takes care of. There is nothing big as such. Anything additional we have to do, it is not there.
Correct. The spirit of the law is 4 meetings in a year, whichever year it is. That is right. Yeah. Few timelines are revised as may be specified by the board. What will be the rationale behind and which will be the timeline?
So those are the ones which I think Sudhakar sir mentioned, 31st December 24, where SEBI will come out with those things. Corporate governance format for uploading CG report and the 13.3 disclosure. Right, Ashwini?
Yes, yes. The timelines have not been specified yet. We will await another notification.
Yes.
As per Schedule 3.
See, just 1 minute, Bala. If I am not wrong, as on date, the corporate governance report is to be filed within 15 days.
21 days.
Maybe, pardon?
21 days.
21 days. Okay,
21
21 days. Maybe SEBI is contemplating by let me bring that to 15 days. Okay, or maybe within 30 days. It all depends upon their SEBI must be having something in their mind. Most probably, according to me, that 15, why I have used the word is that I'm thinking that they may bring it down from 21 days to 15 days. This is what
And
my
some
gut feel.
unified portal also they are talking somewhere. I think that
Yeah,
also
correct.
might be on their mind. Yeah.
True.
As per Schedule 3, India's financial statement, there are only two details. That is revenue from the operations and other income. How it is the link is decided turnover. So further, turnover defines as per the Companies Act 2013 is on cash for our and not accrual turnover against the accounts and based on accounting. Again on accrual accounting.
See, ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to go as per your financial statements, whether they prepared as per Ind AS or they're prepared as per that your IGAP is concerned. But what it says is always the financial as per the latest audited financial statements. That is the word which we normally used both in the listing regulations as well as in the Companies Act also. Recently, somebody was asking me in the case of turnover whether we have to take net of GST or inclusive of GST. So my answer to that is whatever you are reflecting in your financial statements under that particular heads, those are the figures what we have to take.
What is the relevance of the deletion of definition of off year?
Maybe that is not referred to anywhere in the listing regulations. I have not examined as such. Might be that is the only thing. It might be, or Sebi might have thought why to define half year and it may be redundant. Because whenever any kind of amendments takes place, normally it is the any kind of redundant clauses or certain clauses which were what's called as relevant at one point of time, but irrelevant this point of time. So those
Need to
kind of
change.
changes do
Yeah.
happen. This might be one of such changes.
In case of the resignation, company has to fill the vacancy within 3 months. Request to confirm.
If the resignation is not leading to non-compliance on the composition aspect, it can be filled within 3 months. But if it is leading to any non-compliance, it has to be done immediately.
Yeah,
So-
here probably the regulators give the flexibility to the board, but as you rightly say, if it is the compliance matter and the action is called for immediately. Yeah. What is the impact of using the word turnover instead of the income in material subsidiary definition?
I think companies were taking turnover and not income. Usually, people don't call turnover as income in their financial statements. I think it is just removing that ambiguity from the minds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But income include other income also, right? Actually.
Normally, companies, what they do is
So
they
I think, I Prajakta clarified. So I think they have clarified. Better you take turnover, which is the
Turnover.
right criteria.
Correct. Yeah.
only thing is companies are normally presented what you call the income from the operations and income from the other sources. That is the way. But the totality it has to be taken.
The turnover, right?
Yeah. Please clarify the amendment relating to the CS to be placed before the level of the board of directors. Say today CS actually reporting to the CFO. Does he mean that he is reporting to be changed? If yes, whom? The CMD or WTD?
We have discussed it.
I think he has discussed elaborately on this, I think.
Correct.
Can secretarial auditor appointed by the board for the year financial year 2024-25 issue the report of the secretarial audit for the said year May 25, but if before was appointed approved at the AGM be held in the year 2025, say in July, August or September?
So we will be discussing this in the secretarial audit slide. We'll discuss.
Okay. What is the meaning of one level below?
We have discussed.
See, one level below is nothing but reporting to the board directly.
Sir, should we say that, one level below could also mean you allow the company secretary to, to open up in front of the board members? I mean, does it need to be always reporting to the board means, administrative reporting like you mentioned?
No, as I say, that one level below the board means if you see in the organogram, what happens?
Yeah.
Who are the people one level below the board? Normally, it is the CEO
Correct.
or the managing director or the
Correct.
whole-time directors.
Correct.
These are the people one level below the board. And in some companies, not necessarily at the managing director only, even the president level people who are taking care of operations and all independently, they also report to the board directly.
Correct.
Now, reporting to the board directly means if a board, there are 14 directors are there, whom he will approach. It is not like that. The board has to say that for this particular purpose, he may have to report to the managing director, who in turn will come back to the board or something like that. Or alternately, he may say that for the purpose of listing regulations, the compliance officer will report to the chairman directly, chairman of the board. That is normally it happens.
Correct.
So it is the board which has to take a decision. It has to give a clarity to the compliance officer to whom he has to approach in case of any problem is there.
Correct.
But at the same point of time, because he cannot approach 14 different directors for different purposes, then it will be a completely chaos will take place. Because suppose the independent directors are there, they may not be knowing. But at the same point of time, what listing regulations wants when the compliance officer has to report to the board directly means, if suppose he's not being heard by a particular director, the compliance officer can approach other directors also. It is not like that by he has no access to them. That is
Correct.
what this thing,
Correct. That we need to clarify. That's what.
Correct. Yeah.
He should disclose whatever he has, and if he's not being heard, he should speak out, is what it means, basically.
See, sometimes what happened is, sometimes what happened on the board, you have executive directors.
Correct.
On the board, you have independent directors. Board, you may be having nominee directors. Suppose the chairman might be an executive person. Suppose for whatever the reasons it is, God forbids, if the executive directors are not listening to him, and he approaches the independent directors. Tomorrow, the executive director should not be able to question him why you have approached these people, because he got the right. Legally, he has been given this particular right by making the provisions in such a way that he has to report to the board directly.
And I will add to that, as Prajakta mentioned, that it is disclosed. So it is not only right, it is duty. Since duty is imposed on this, this regulation has now given, this amendment has right also to CS, because you are responsible, so you have right. And as rightly Prajakta also said, that whether it is below, basically intention is to that entire board. When we say board is entire board, as Sudhakar said, you cannot meet all 14. So that administratively, there can be a director member of the board of that, which channel board can decide, and it can be passed
See,
on.
in fact, Deepti, I will go one step further. See, whenever my reportee is somebody, the board should know who are their reportees. Normally, what happens is, who are their reportees up to the board? It is the CEO or managing director, whole-time director, people like that. So it is the responsibility of the board once in a while to check with him whether everything is going fine, any issues are there or not. It is the board's responsibility indirectly. So here also what happened is, one of the reportees to the board is the compliance officer. So it is the responsibility of the board to also sometimes sit with the compliance officer, maybe together with others or maybe in isolation also, and to ensure that whether the compliances are happening the way they are supposed to happen. Any kind of hiccups are there, any kind of loose ends are there, any kind of issues which need to be resolved. So it is the responsibility of the board also to ensure this. It's not only the one-way kind of thing.
Very important point, Sudhakar. This is the knowledge board should be given, that who are the responsible to them, who are one level below them. They are responsible for this, but these are the people who shoulder this responsibility. So as a duty, you connect with this all your reporting and check that what is happening. It's very good point, Sudhakar. I really appreciate this lookout. Thanks.
Sudhakar, you brought it really a very good point, because you know what happens. I'll tell you one thing. Personally, I was actually asked to look after the internal audit actually in the organization where I was working, in addition to the company secretary's job. So board has given a very categorical instruction. I got a letter in writing saying that all the internal audit matter is concerned, you will be reporting directly to the audit committee chairman. And as far as secretarial matter is concerned, you will be reporting to the chairman of the board and as well as the managing director who keep apprised. That is the way. So as you rightly say here, in case of the listing agreement is concerned, they will have to designate, they will have to give to whom to report. That is the way the A company has to take a call. That is what it is required actually. It is not that administratively he may be reporting whosoever the boss he is assigned. But as far the job is concerned, especially when it comes to the listing related matter is concerned, he has to report directly whosoever the designated, either the chairman or the managing director, whosoever it is, that is what he has to see and ensure the compliance. Okay, then we'll go. Can secretarial auditor, this we have discussed, I think so. On attaining the age of 75 means, does it mean the year in which a director attains 75 years, companies should move special resolution in that year?
The word uses prior to him attaining the age of 75. So before that only you'll have to.
No, that is your right actually. If he is going to retire 75 years, I think before that the action should be there so that once he retires, the successors should be available. Yeah.
Yes.
See, according to me, this is more of a clarificatory in nature. Otherwise, also, if you see in the Companies Act also, the time of appointment or continuation of the director, you have to have the prior approval of the shareholders. That means what? At the time of appointment, if a particular gentleman is having 73-year-old, but during the tenure, suppose okay, before if he is an independent director, that 5 years, or if it is a director other than independent director retired by rotation, if he is crossing that 75 years during this period, prior to that, they have to obtain the shareholders' approval. That is clearly it is there. So this is not a big change as such. It is only a more clarity has been brought in according to me.
Okay. Resolution is passed before the directors attain the age of 75 and not after he is attaining the age. Does it actually indirectly mean that maximum age would be 80, assuming the resolution is just passed before the age of 75 is actually crossed?
See, the answer to this question is when a person is crossing the year 75, you have to pass the resolution. But this resolution, according to me, if I interpret correctly, it is only required once. In future reappointment, suppose when the person, suppose you are appointing an independent director who is 75-year-old and he completed his first term and he is going to be for the second term, at point of time, he might have attained the age of 80. Again, you don't need a shareholder's approval for a person to appoint who has crossed 75 years because already you have obtained that. Okay. That is how it is. Only one time you have to take that approval once a person crosses 75 years of age.
Whether holding the CS shall be employed under the subsidiary company. Currently, CS in the employment is the holding company.
This is what I have said, that in case company secretaries who is employed in the parent company, who has been seconded to the subsidiary company, then and that subsidiary company is a listed company which has to comply with regulation 6, then that employment is to be with the subsidiary company which is a listed company.
Even though appointment of the director by the financial regarding the does not need shareholders approval in LODR. However, we understand we need to actually seek approval as per the Companies Act. Please guide.
So what is the question?
I really can't hear us. Even though appointment of the directors by financial regulation does not need shareholders approval in LODR. However, we understand we need to seek approval as per the Companies Act. Please guide. I'm
See,
also
only I couldn't understand the question properly, but one thing I can say that you have to, if your company is a listed company, you have to comply with the requirements of Companies Act as well as the requirements of listing regulations. Okay. If at both the places it may be required or at one place it may be required, you have to comply with both.
as per the Companies Act, appointment of the director requires shareholders approval. However, Sebi, as per the amendment, notified the directors appointed by regulator not requires shareholders approval. The understanding in the Sebi can make provisions more stringent within the powers of the Companies Act. The question here is, Sebi overrides the provision of the Companies Act. Can director appointed by a regulator require shareholders approval as per the Companies Act?
No, the amendment is pretty clear that whenever a regulator's appointment is coming in, you will not need shareholders' approval. Right, Ashwini?
Where Sebi says shareholders approval is not required.
In this amendment,
So that's
What
like
it says?
17C, right?
What it says that?
shareholders approval. A person nominated by financial sector regulator court to the board no longer required to seek shareholders approval. Companies Act requires.
Which is the amendment project? Which one
Sir,
you are
it
referring?
is Regulation 17(1)(c) is substituted. There is a proviso which is added. It reads, I will just read that proviso. Provided further that the requirements specified in this clause shall not be applicable to appointment or reappointment of a person nominated by a financial sector regulator, court or tribunal to the board of the listed entity. So the appointment or reappointment will not require shareholder approval if the nomination is by financial sector regulator, court or tribunal on the listed entities board.
You are talking about 17(1)(c). Am I correct?
Yes, yes.
So 17(1)(c) says that the listed entity shall ensure that the approval of shareholders for appointment or reappointment of a person on the board of directors or as a manager is taken at the next general meeting or within the time approved within 3 months from the date of appointment, whichever is earlier.
Correct.
Provided that if such appointment or reappointment of a person to the board of directors or as a manager is subject to the approval of a regulatory, government or statutory authorities, then the time taken to receive such approval shall be excluded from
Excluded.
the purposes of this clause.
Yes.
Provided further that a public sector company shall ensure that the approval of this thing.
Hmm.
Provided further that the requirements specified in this clause shall not be applicable to appointment or reappointment of a person nominated by a financial sector regulator, court or tribunal to the board of the listed entity. So the only thing is that under 17(1)(c), that whatever that timelines and all are there, that is not required. But under the Companies Act 255, if I am not wrong, 251, sorry, 252, not even 250, 152, what I am saying, that 152, you have to, every director is to be approved by the shareholders in
Correct,
appointment.
absolutely right. Shareholders has to
So,
be by the shareholders. Yeah.
so this particular 17(1)(c) is slightly different to that of 152 requirement. But anyway, as I have mentioned to you, that for all the participants may kindly note that you have to comply with both the requirements. So under the Companies Act, every data, what here they are saying is in case of any financial regulator or the central government, if they are appointing, the shareholders' approval might not be required under the Regulation 17, but under Section 152 of the Companies Act, it requires shareholders' approval. So you have to obtain the shareholders' approval. Only thing is, within the 3 months thing, it may not be required.
Exclude. Hmm.
So you will appoint them under the Companies Act as an additional director who will be, his appointment will be valid till the commencement of the next annual general meeting of the company.
Yeah, correct. At the end of the financial year, whatever it is, we are following it 6 months. That means
Correct.
September in case of the April to March, and yeah, in case of the calendar year, it will be June. That will be the case. But under the Companies Act, it is required. You said initially also, because all the companies which are registered on the Companies Act, they are allowed to comply with the Companies Act requirement. In addition to that listing. So really speaking, in this particular case, one has to comply with the Companies Act requirement because shareholders' approval will be required for the appointment of the directors.
And such entities to whom Companies Act is not applicable, then this shareholder approval criteria is gone to such listed entities.
If this is a mandatory separation of the role, one more KMP with a reference to the compliance officer.
Sorry.
In this mandatory separation of the role, one more KMP with a reference to the compliance officer.
Okay, so you are saying, I think the question is that if there is a compliance officer other than the company secretary appointed under Companies Act.
Yeah, that is
Is
what
the-
it means, I think so.
Yeah.
Because if we have
So,
a compliance officer separately other than the company's officer,
so
the
if
question seems to be one more KMP. Is this the mandatory separation of the role?
yeah, it means yes. It looks like both company secretary and that compliance officer would be covered as KMP under Companies Act.
Compliance officer only for the limited purposes, compliance of the listing agreement requirement, right? Many companies have formal compliance officer who is responsible for the compliances of various laws applicable to the company. Okay, will this webinar will be live on the your yes, after the webinar is over, it is always disseminated through the YouTube. You can have the access actually. Can you please guide how will companies demonstrate the implementation of the amendment with the reference to compliance officer reporting to the one level below the board? Should this be resolution passed to this effect?
Correct. Because it is the board for they have to decide that he will be reporting to the board directly. Something there should be some kind of a change has to happen.
If company secretary is not one level below the level of the board, as per the organization structure, between the directly reporting to CMD as per the company by virtue of the appointment, CS company, how he should be actually interpreted.
We have discussed this already.
I think you discussed elaborately this on this matter, I think so. Here does not actually talk about the reporting of the laws, but it says about placing the CS in hierarchy below the board of directors.
They have not said that. They have not said that. They said that the compliance officer is to be one level below the board and directly reporting to the board. That's what they say. In the hierarchy and all those words, they have not used it as such.
Do we need to employ two person now? One for the whole time company secretary, one which is the time for the compliance officer? Please clarify.
You can have. In fact, you see that when the Sebi listing regulations 2015 has come, that point of time also I used to say that the company secretary of the company need not be the compliance officer. See, let us be very clear. The compliance officer is only for the purpose of listing regulations exclusively. He is not a compliance officer under the Companies Act. He is not a compliance officer under the other applicable laws. So when you are appointing a person under Regulation 6 of Sebi Listing Regulations 2015, so-and-so is going to be the compliance officer of the company. So his role is confined only to the compliances of the listing regulations. Same is the case with insider trading regulations also. There, only difference between the PIT regulations and LODR is there the person not necessarily is to be a qualified company secretary. In case of insider trading regulations, the compliance officer should be a fairly senior managerial position, having fair amount of knowledge about the insider trading regulations, and he should be able to appreciate the requirement. That's it. That's how the definition goes. Okay.
Two learned panelists genuinely believe that a compliance officer being administratively reporting to the CFO or CEO will be able to access the board for compliance reporting. It's practically not possible, according to me, in a small or middle type of the companies.
See, when we say administratively reporting means, say, for example, he has to go on vacation. He has to apply for a leave. Is he going to write to the board, kindly sanction me the leave? That is administrative purpose. So similarly, administratively, say, for example, if he is not coming to office punctually, not coming on time, not leaving on time. So administrative requirements are different to that of legal requirements. So every organization, the reportings are most of the times it will be separate, for functional reporting and administrative reporting. This is nothing new as such, this on the organizations, these kind of things do happen. Only thing is here they are formalizing that. That's it.
This question is addressed to Sudhagar. Whether change of the reporting of the compliance officer will indirectly result into owing all compliances application of the company on a company secretary. This amendment is primarily meant for the ensuring the compliances with the LODR. However, to ensure the compliance with all the applicable laws rest with actually the operating management under CEO. How the compliance officer, the differential between the two reporting requirement, that is for compliance with the LODR versus compliance with the other laws.
See, the directors of the company are responsible, and they have to give an affirmation also under section 134 in the director's responsibility statement that they have complied with all the applicable laws to the company. So normally what happens is that when a company secretary is appointed, in his terms of appointment, one of the things is that he has to comply with all the applicable laws of the company. That is your internal matter as far as the organization and that particular company secretary is concerned. Whereas here it is slightly different. Here there is a legal requirement stating that, see, there under the Companies Act, it is the board which is responsible for the compliance of all applicable laws to the company. That is not the direct responsibility of the company secretary as such. Under section 120, that
135.
225, no? Functions
135.
of a company secretary.
205.
205, sorry,
205.
205. In the 205, they said that he has to ensure compliance of the company's law requirements. They are not talking about all applicable laws to the company. So all applicable laws compliance is the responsibility of the board, not the company secretary. They assign that responsibility to the company secretary at the time of his appointment. One of the terms of his appointment is to ensure the compliance with this thing. That is how they have to go about it. As far as this particular amendment is concerned, this is a what's called as you can say a legal requirement that there should be a compliance officer. That compliance officer is to be a qualified company secretary. He should be in the whole time employment of the company. He should be designated as a key managerial person. So then what happens is obviously who is a KMP, how his appointment has to take place. Obviously, you have to fall back upon 203 requirements. Okay.
Is it necessary that the compliance officer needs to be employed by the listed entity? Can the compliance officer appointed in the capacity of the consultant and not as an employee?
Full-time employee.
Full-time employee.
Generally, compliance confirmation given by the CEO, not by the CS.
See, there are different requirements out there. CEO is not going to give a compliance requirement. It's always the compliance officer who has to give it to the board of directors at the board meeting. Okay. I don't think where the company secretary appointment is not there or something like that, CEO might be giving it. But CEO never gives that compliance this thing. Unless until it is a banking company, some kind of a banking regulation act or RBI requirements are there, it is a different thing altogether.
In fact, the board also may ask company secretary only to give that confirmation.
Yeah.
Would this also mean that the compliance officer also has to appointed by the board at a duly convened board meeting only? That means the practice of the company's checks doing appointed through the circular resolutions.
That is what I said, that KMP appointment, you have to go as per 203. If I am not wrong, you cannot appoint a key managerial person by way of a circular resolution. Okay.
Correct.
Regulation 6 does not actually categorically that compliance officer should report to the board of directors. There is actually a mention in the word board in regulation 6ZB, but under LODR regulation, board means Sebi. Can you clarify?
That they will come with some amendment, if they notice this thing. I agree with you. Board in the listing regulations means it is Sebi, but it is not that case. It is here, they might be referring to the board of directors only.
The CS and the compliance officer can still be the same person. Am I right? Yeah,
Yes,
that
why
can
not?
be. There's no problem at all because it's normally it happens to smaller companies only. Only in comes to the bigger companies, they need another person. Yeah, that is right. If whole time CS appointed as a compliance officer, does this satisfy the amended regulations?
Yes.
Of course, yes.
Yes.
Compliance officer taking KMP as per the LODR, then Companies Act need to be amended.
No.
Why? Why?
No.
We have been talking actually Companies Act regulations are Companies Act requirement is different, LODR regulations are different.
In fact, sir,
You
I
have to
would
comply
like
with
to say
both.
here, no, sir, I would like to comment here. I think when the LODR said that compliance officer needs to be a company secretary, and in case of larger organizations, when there were two individuals appointed, one person as a company secretary under Companies Act, and when he was categorized as a KMP under Companies Act, and suppose Mr. B was appointed as a compliance officer under LODR, there was an anomaly that Mr. A was KMP under Companies Act, and Mr. B, though he was a compliance officer, he was not categorized as a KMP. I think now with this amendment, Mr. B is also categorized as KMP. Is
I
a
think by
welcome move.
virtue of the
Yeah.
appointment, the company secretary is being appointed as a compliance officer. I think by virtue of the definition, he becomes the KMP itself under the Companies Act.
Correct. And now with compliance officer under LODR, this amendment, the compliance officer, which was also a company secretary, if he was a separate person, now that person also is becoming a KMP.
Yeah, correct. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Do we need to show the reporting of the CS to MD board in the organization chart also? I think this is the totally an internal matter, as Sudhakar actually explained. Administrative reporting, functional reporting, and other things and all. Practically, CS cannot directly report any issue to the board. Let's understand practically. It has to be actually routed through the MD or CEO, and therefore I feel administrative reporting should be to chairman, to MD or CEO or WTD.
I think we have discussed enough on this thing, and let's go further.
And the reporting of the compliance is to the board of the appointment one level below the level. Is it actually the split of the compliance of the administratively to the control should be in the hands of the board? I think it's the same question more or less.
Yeah.
In the current structure of our company, the compliance will report directly to the chairman, the managing director, but does not fall under the category being one level below the board terms of the organization hierarchy. Please advise whether the arrangement satisfies the requirement of the LODR regulations as amended, or whether modifications or reporting structure is actually demonstrated in the secretary to ensure compliance.
See, I have mentioned already about this thing that organogram of a company is concerned. Legal organogram, he should be placed one level below the board, because for the purpose of this listing regulations, his reporting is directly to the board. So when you prepare an organogram for this particular purpose, he will be one level below the board only. For your internal purpose, your administrative organogram might be slightly different to that of the. Okay, because organogram is nothing but a pictorial presentation of the reporting structure. That's it. So whether he is to be there in the organogram or not, that is all immaterial. Yeah.
Mr. Sudhakar's view is not practically possible, as administrative is not possible in an employee of the organization to work partly in senior level and LODR and others in the junior level. Provided there is no gap more than 120 days. I don't know. This is the second question. I think
Not practically possible, as administratively it is not possible for an employee of an organization to work partly at senior level. See, it is not a question of senior level or junior level. Please try to understand what I'm trying to say. A company secretary in every organization cannot be at the level of president or at the level of a CEO, at the level of a CFO. It may be one notch below or two notches below also. But in case of a listed company, there is a legal requirement. What it says is that person should be one level below the board, means his reporting to be directly to the board of directors. What I'm trying to say is now practically when you have to implement the listing regulations, you have to make a carve out. In that carve out, what it is there is for the purpose of listing regulation compliances, he is appointed as a compliance officer for the purpose of listing regulations. So in your board, when you are appointing the compliance officer for the purpose of listing regulations, you may clearly bring that thing that he is Mr. Company Secretary XYZ. He has been appointed as a company secretary who is also a key managerial person. He has been appointed as a compliance officer for the purpose of Sebi listing regulations 2015. And for the purpose of this particular compliances, his reporting will be to the board of directors directly. What is the problem in this? Now, when I say that administrative reporting means all other things, suppose he need a loan, He has to approach somebody. He cannot approach the board for that. He need to go on a leave. There may be some kind of any other related issues are there. Some kind of disciplinary action is to be taken against him relating to administrative. Who will take it? Every time the board is not going to do that. So please appreciate what the requirement is and why that is. You understand the spirit behind that. What Sebi says is the compliance officer hands are to be strengthened. Suppose if this requirement is not there, he cannot approach the board bypassing the person to whom he is administratively reporting. See, normal reporting, what happens in the organizations, he may be reporting to the CFO, he may be reporting to the CEO. If this requirement is not there, he cannot bypass them and approach the board directly. Now, what happened is legally he has a right to approach the board directly because he has to report to the board as far as the compliances of listing regulations are concerned. Because as a compliance officer, he has been entrusted upon with a legal responsibility to ensure the compliances. There may be some hiccups in that. For that hiccups, to whom he has to approach? Sebi says you approach to the board directly. As I told, that's why I told you that in case it is a responsibility of the board also to ensure that its reportee is functioning whatever the requirements are there appropriately or not. So once in a while, they have to check with the compliance officer. Is the compliances properly there as per listing regulations? Do you have any issues relating to that? That is what it's the responsibility of the board. Okay.
And I will
Yeah.
just add that, as you rightly said, board should be informed of the amendment, and this amendment should be run through. There is a requirement of directors training, independence director training. CS is the right person who will be giving some knowledge on this, and you can insist on the process to be followed as regards communication of LODR compliances. And that itself will solve the issue of administrative compliance or like that. So it is to be carved out. We have to work out on the process. Yeah, thanks.
So can I move forward now?
Yeah, I think otherwise we will not able to. We'll come back.
I
This
think
one
we'll complete the presentation, then we'll take up the rest of the questions. Yeah.
Next amendment is with respect to disclosure of board decisions based on meeting.
Just 1 minute, 1 minute, Ashwini. See, we may discuss till the cows come home as far as this particular Regulation 6 amendment is concerned. Please appreciate that what I am trying to give out is a kind of how it is going to be implemented practically or pragmatically. You have to work out some kind of a leeway. This is the only possibility. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
This is with disclosure of board decisions based on meeting conclusion time. So if the conclusion time of the board meeting is after the normal trading hours beyond 3:30 p.m., but more than 3 hours before the next trading session, then the disclosure timeline has been increased from 30 minutes to 3 hours, within 3 hours. Suppose the meeting has got over at 5:30 p.m., then by 8:30, the outcome can be put on the stock exchange website. It is not 30 minutes for them. For any other case that it is within the trading hours timeline, then it has to be done within 30 minutes. Next is disclosure of acquisition. Disclosure of acquisition in any company, if the listed entity would hold shares or voting rights aggregating to 20%, that is up from 5%, subsequent changes exceeding 5%, then disclosure has to be made. Then the disclosure in case of an unlisted entity, acquisition of shares or voting rights aggregating to 5% or changes exceeding 2% shall be disclosed quarterly in integrated filing governance report. Next is on the analyst or institutional investor meets. A new concept of disclosure of names of analysts or institutional investors is introduced. Such disclosure is currently optional for listed entities. Presentations prepared by the listed entity for analyst or institutional investors meet or post-earnings quarterly calls has to be disclosed to stock exchanges before the beginning of such events. Further, the audio recordings of post-earning quarterly calls shall also be made available promptly on the company's website before the or within 24 hours from the conclusion of such calls. Video recordings of post-earning calls shall be on company's website within 48 hours from the conclusion. So these are self-explanatory amendments in these disclosure requirement. Further, transcripts of post-earning quarterly calls to be made on website for 5 years, and therefore it needs to be preserved by the company for 8 years. Audio video recordings to be available on website for 2 years instead of 5 years now. This audio video recording has to be preserved by company for 8 years as per the preservation policy of the company. Transcripts of post-earning to be available on website for 5 years and preserved by the company for 8 years. Next is a major amendment that has come in with respect to the secretarial auditor. Now, this amendment, as we have discussed earlier, is going to be effective 1st of April 2025. This amendment has been brought in line with the provisions like similar to the statutory auditors under the Companies Act. The secretarial auditor shall now be appointed or removed by the shareholders in the annual general meeting. The term for individual is 5 years and firm of company secretaries is 2 terms of 5 years, which is aligning with the statutory auditor's appointment provisions. The secretarial auditor who shall be appointed shall be a peer review practicing company secretary. Further, the annual secretarial compliance report that is being issued may be issued by the secretarial auditor or any other PCS which is a peer reviewed practicing company secretary. The casual vacancy arising out of the death, resignation, or disqualification of secretarial auditor shall be filled by the board of directors within 3 months, and secretarial auditor so appointed shall hold office till the conclusion of the next annual general meeting. Sir, should I go ahead?
Yeah, please.
Next is with respect to website disclosures. Following additional documents or information shall now be placed on the website of a listed entity: the articles of association, the memorandum of association, brief profile of the board of directors, including their directorships and full-time positions in body corporate, your employee benefit scheme documents, and presentations prepared by the listed entity for analysts or institutional investors meet, post earnings or quarterly calls prior to beginning of such events. Another major amendment that has come in with respect to related party transactions. 4 major amendments have come in respect to RPT. That is, one is the ratification of transactions is now allowed, but it is subject to certain conditions. Second is prior approval of audit committee shall not be required for payment of sitting fees and remuneration to directors and KMPs. Third is omnibus approval has now been extended to subsidiary companies. And fourth is we will see what is the exempted related party transactions. Ratification of RPT is a major amendment that has been brought in because this concept was already there in the Companies Act but was not forming a part of Sebi regulations. Here, Regulation 23(2) states that independent directors in the audit committee may ratify related party transactions within 3 months from entering the transaction or in the immediate next meeting, whichever is earlier. However, it is subjective. The conditions are the value of the ratified transaction with a related party, whether entered into individually or taken together, which is now very clearly specified that all series of transactions have to be considered during a financial year is less than rupees 1 crore in a financial year. Next, it is not a material transaction under Regulation 23(1) of LODR. Further, rationale for not being able to seek prior approval shall also be placed before the audit committee. Ratification details to be disclosed in half-yearly RPT disclosures that we give under Regulation 23(9). Further, additional conditions may be specified by the audit committee for the ratification. So as soon as the audit committee meets, they may decide if they want to ratify. So there will be 2 conditions. One is the audit committee may decide to ratify a transaction or will decide to not go ahead with the transaction. Then that has to be decided by the audit committee in their upcoming meeting. So then this can be taken into account. Failure to seek ratification of the audit committee shall render the transaction voidable at the option of the audit committee. So audit committee may decide to adopt such transaction, ratify such transaction, or may also decide to cancel the transaction.
The only one thing I would like to add here, Ashwini, is that some people are under that impression that the moment you have not taken prior approval but got it ratified by the audit committee or by the board, whatever the case it may be, there is no problem as such. See, ratification is only for the purpose that if you don't get the ratification, that particular transaction becomes voidable at the option of the company. By getting it ratified, only thing is that will not happen. As far as non-compliance is concerned with section 177 or 188, that is going to be there. That penal provisions are going to be there. So that one has to be very clear about that. Some people think that the moment that action is ratified, as if there is no non-compliance. That is not correct.
The non-compliance remains.
Correct.
Under Regulation 23, Sub-Regulation 2, the remuneration and sitting fees paid to its directors, KMP or senior management, excluding the promoter group, is now exempt from prior approval of audit committee only if the transaction is not a material transaction. And further, remuneration and sitting fees paid by the subsidiary of the listed company to its directors or KMP or senior management is now also exempt from prior approval of audit committee only if the transaction is not a material transaction. Another important is Regulation 23, Sub-Regulation 5, which says that transactions given below will not require shareholders' approval. Transactions which are in the nature of payment of statutory dues or statutory fees or statutory charges and entered into between an entity on one hand and central government or state government or any combination, and transactions entered into between a public sector company and the central government or state government on the other hand or any combination shall not require shareholders' approval. Next amendment is on the omnibus approval for related party transactions entered by the subsidiary. For the transactions at subsidiaries level, omnibus approval can also be taken in line with the omnibus approval undertaken by the listed entity. The audit committee will have to set out the criteria for granting the omnibus approval for its subsidiary. Further, the audit committee of the listed entity shall monitor those related party transactions on quarterly basis. So does this mean all the transactions that require omnibus approval at subsidiary level will have to be taken at holdco company level? The answer is no. The transactions which exceed 10% of the standalone turnover of the subsidiary, only those transactions also will go to the holdco company for omnibus approval purposes. Further, the definition of related party transaction has been changed, and the following transactions has specifically given that the following transactions will not be considered as a related party transaction. First is the corporate actions by subsidiaries of a listed entity and corporate actions received by the listed entity. So the dividend, payment of dividend and all such activities are now exempt. So receipt of dividend is also exempt as a related party transaction. Earlier payment was already an exempted related party transaction. Second is acceptance of current account deposits or saving account deposits by banks and payment of interest thereon in compliance with the directions issued. So if you are complying with the RBI norms from time to time, then these transactions will be exempted to you. Third important thing is retail purchases from any listed entity or its subsidiary by its directors or employees. Now here specifically they have mentioned only the directors and employees. So any retail purchase made from the listed entity through the retail branches or the retail outlets of any listed company, which will not establish a business relationship, that it is not going to be a continuous relationship but just a one-off incident, and at other terms which are uniformly applicable and is offered to all employees and directors, is now an exempted related party transaction. Further, it is also stated that one would still have to evaluate such requirement from the perspective of Section 177 of Companies Act, and whether you will take a prior approval of audit committee will have to be decided. Sudhakar sir, would you like to say something?
And in fact, this is a very important thing. Several times people are under the impression if any kind of exemptions are there under 188, it is automatically exempted under 177, which is not the case. Of course, then this by now, I am sure that everybody might have understood that clearly. Same is the case now. Certain exemptions are there in the related party transactions under Regulation 23. The same exemptions might have been covered under 188 or might not have been covered under 188. So you have to see that separately. Suppose these exempted transactions under the listing regulations, if they are not exempted under the Companies Act, then you have to comply with 188 provisions. That means wherever you require shareholders approval, you have to take that. Wherever you require the board approval, you have to take that. Suppose, say, for example, in 188 also it is exempted. But in case of 177, there are absolutely no exemptions. Every transaction with a related party has to have the prior approval under the audit committee. So definitely what you rightly said is that you have to ensure that audit committee approval has been taken for every related party transaction. Okay. Yeah.
So should we take any questions or I should go?
I think
How
we
many
go
more
for some
slides
more
are there?
time, because there are a lot of questions are there.
So complete the presentation now because there will be a lot of them questions. Yeah.
Another important amendment that has come in is with respect to reclassification of promoters, Regulation 31A, with immediate effect. Sebi has revamped the process of reclassification of promoter and promoter group to public. Earlier, the provision was that prior approval has to be taken from the stock exchange before applying for reclassification of promoters. Now, companies need to seek NOC. And a timeline is also given that the stock exchange has to give that NOC within a period of 30 days. After receipt of the no objection certificate, the company has to ensure that the shareholder approval is in place within 60 days. So under Regulation 31A 8B of LODR, the outcome of the board meeting, including their views on the reclassification request, has to be disclosed. So first is prior approval mechanism has gone. It has been replaced with NOC. Timeline has been brought in for the reclassification that within 3 months this has to be done. And this provision is coming into effect with immediate effect. Next amendment is with respect to annual report and financial statements. The listed companies shall send a letter with web link to access the annual reports instead of dispatching the hard copy of annual report to the shareholders whose email addresses are not registered. So this is a very important amendment. They should send a letter with the web link. The next is the listed companies shall give a public advertisement of financial results via a QR code and the details of the web page. So they need not print the entire financial results. They can give a QR code and details of the web page.
So this is the advantage. This is the amendment what I was mentioning. The compliance cost is going to be reduced drastically, especially for big companies where your shareholder base is very large. So, for example, in case of Reliance, 3 million shareholders plus is the shareholder base. So now what happens because of this, wherever your registered email IDs are not there, earlier we were to send the hard copies of the annual reports, which is not required now. So you are saving as far as the printing cost is concerned, the paper cost is concerned. Similarly, the postage cost is concerned. And similarly, in case of this quarterly financial statements also, that publishing it in the newspapers is not required. You have to simply give that QR code and the web page, so the advertisement will be smaller in size. However, they have given an option to the listed companies. If they want to do it, by all means, they can do it voluntarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next amendment is with respect to record date. The time gap between the intimation and actual record date has now been reduced to 3 working days from the 7 working days, except for corporate action through a scheme of arrangement. Further, the minimum gap between 2 record dates has been reduced to 5 working days from 30 days, and the minimum gap between 2 book closures is now omitted.
I think more or less the book closure is actually gone now. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Working with only with the record date. Book closure more or less remain only in theory. Yeah.
Further relaxations from certain compliance for companies coming out of IBC framework. Companies coming out of corporate insolvency resolution process would now have additional time to comply with LODR. 3-month time for filling up the vacancy of KMP, subject to having at least one full-time KMP. 3 months to have the required board committee composition. Additional time of 45 days or 60 days for annual results to be provided for disclosure of financial results for the quarter in which the resolution plan is approved. So the timeline has now been given for the compliance with the Sebi requirements. Last part is the discretionary requirement. So independent directors of the top 2000 listed entities are now encouraged to hold at least 2 meetings annually without non-independent directors or management. This is increased from 1 meeting a year, but at the moment it is discretionary. Entities ranked 1000 to 2000 are now 1001 to 2000 are allowed to form a risk management committee. Further, the disclosures in XBRL format by debt listed entities as per the guidelines specified by the stock exchanges. So with this, I cover all the amendments, so we can take the questions.
Yeah.
So you can stop sharing the presentation, I think.
But I think we will require to go back if required the question. So
Yeah, yeah, 1 minute. Just give me a minute. Proper exemption should be actually introduced in the Companies Act vis-a-vis LVR Sudhakar sir, as technically compliance officer required more relatively in the LODR regulation only. Can listed entity appoint the interim compliance officer?
Yeah. Say, for example, if the regular compliance officer has resigned, till the time you get a person, you can do it in the interim, but again, you have to ensure the qualifications and the appointment procedure and is there. You have to ensure that.
Sudhakar, one small doubt. Can a compliance officer for an interim, if you are talking, can be other than the company secretary?
So that's what I told you, no? The qualification that whatever the person is there, that requirements under Regulation 6, those are to be complied with. You cannot appoint anybody and everybody as a compliance officer, whatever the legal
Qualification has to
requirements
be
are there.
company
I
secretary.
think it is mentioned also, if I am not wrong, the interim person, whoever is going to be appointed, he has to satisfy those conditions.
But practically, I have seen in some of the company, they appoint the interim compliance officer as a CFO, who is not a qualified company secretary.
So that was earlier, but it is not possible under the amended regulations.
Okay. Is there any change in the appointment process of the qualification criteria in the appointment of the secretarial auditor for the financial year 24-25?
The amendment is prospective. So from 2025, we will see the compliance with respect to this.
So for the financial year 25-26, when you are going to appoint the secretarial auditor, his appointment should be
For a
by the
period
shareholders at the
Shareholder.
forthcoming AGM of the company.
with a term attached.
Correct.
In the responsibility of the compliance officer is specified in the regulations 6, include ensuring the conformity with the regulations provision applicable in the listed entity in letter and spirit. Recent amendment in the company's compliance officer shall not be more than one level below the board. He will report to the regulatory provisions applicable to entity and not only to the LODR regulation. That is actually the correct interpretation as per my view, in contrast view given by the Sudhakar sir.
See, whatever you may understand the things, tomorrow when Sebi comes, God forbids, for any inspection and all, or in fact, as a secretarial auditor also, whether you have complied with the regulation 6 or not, how you will check that thing? So the checking should be that his reporting should be there to the board directly. How you will ensure that? So your board minutes or one way of what's called establishing that my compliance officer is reporting to the board directly. How you will establish that? By merely preparing an organogram, nobody will believe that. You need to have a proper process that properly approved by the board itself. So the way I have mentioned that, you may have to take a resolution stating that in the board meeting, that compliance officer who is a qualified secretary, who is a designated KMP, etc., everything, and he will be reporting to the board directly. Wherever it is not there, it has to be made now. That is how you will establish. Suppose okay, tomorrow, if Sebi comes for this thing and they say by that, okay, now how you have complied with regulation 6, forget about Sebi for a moment. Even the secretarial auditor is also under obligation to ensure that the company has complied with the Sebi regulations. And listing regulations is one part of that. Insider trading regulations is another part of that. So when the secretarial auditor is going to examine that, how you will ensure the compliance with regulation 6? This is how it is to be. So you need to establish that. You cannot simply presenting the organogram one level below the board. I don't think that will work out.
You will have to
Prajakta,
demonstrate.
you
Correct,
may
correct.
further say about
So
this thing.
so one, as a company secretary to the board, you will have to demonstrate what all are the things you have reported to the board during your quarterly or your whatever regular board meetings that you have conducted. What all are the things that you have reported to the board? It is those papers or that information that you have brought across to the board, as a board secretary. What all are the things that you have presented to the board? What kind of support you have brought in as an organizational officer. How have you put forward, what all kind of information have you brought to the board, and how you have supported? Because if you read section 205, there are some duties cast upon you as a company secretary. Now under regulation 5 and 6 also, there are some obligations given under LODR. So please understand, there is an onerous responsibility cast on these compliance officers. So we need to demonstrate how we are able to practice these kind of obligations, and how we are able to give that kind of support. Because what the regulator SEBI is expecting from the company secretaries is that we give that kind of support to the independent directors and to the entire board. Like Sudhakar sir just mentioned, when the board is relying on us for the compliance of all applicable laws, it is that kind of support that is expected from the company secretaries. What are the kinds of processes that we have put in place? Are we flagging off those kinds of instances of non-compliances, or instances of any red flags that we know, or potential conflicts that we come across during our day-to-day operations, or during our our official commitments? Are we coming across some things that we need, that as board they need to know? Are we hiding something from the board?
In fact,
I'll put that way, that compliance officer under LODR is responsible for all the compliances.
Correct.
That the onus is given. When you are given that responsibility, is a big onus. There are many things which will come as your view or interpretation, which can be differently interpreted. At that juncture, you should be given right to place before the board. So it's a right given to you. How you exercise, when you exercise, how you demonstrate you have exercised, that is your own criteria, your own decision as a professional. You have to ensure that you have communicated to the board. And that's why they have specifically mentioned you are one level below the board. That means you are allowed to communicate, you are responsible. Rather, I put that way, it's very clear that you are responsible to the board. And board is responsible. And Sudhakar rightly mentioned that board should know that who are reporting. So put that board also aware that you should also ask the questions. Like CFO are responsible, like CEO, like CS is responsible, compliance officer is responsible. Board should know that entire board is responsible for these all compliances. And LODR has so many compliances which has subjective interpretation. At that juncture, for this kind of compliance, my CS or this compliance officer is responsible and they should report to the board and they will ask them. So it's clarity on the thoughts that it is in between is for reporting purpose, any purpose is person is there, say CMD, CEO, whatever. But for this compliance, this is the LODR compliance officer, they are responsible, their view we have to take.
What is the frequency of
In fact, just 1 minute, Bala. In fact,
Yeah.
see, one more thing I would like to add here is several times the company secretaries used to say that we have been assigned with so much of responsibilities, but we have not been empowered because our reporting is to be to the CFO or CEO, and we can't go beyond that. That is one reason in the insider trading regulations earlier, they said that the compliance officer has to report to the board directly. When that amendment has come, that time, in fact, I brought this question also, why not for listing regulations? So that question is coming up now. What Sebi has done is, in fact, this is a great initiative. That's what I appreciate in this particular amendment. Sebi said that there is so much of, in fact, earlier what they did, while they're defining the senior management, they said that including the CFO and the CS of the company. So that means in the hierarchy, your organogram hierarchy chart is concerned, you may be in a junior position, it doesn't matter. As far as listing regulations are concerned, you are a part of the senior management. Now what they say is that you have to report to the board directly. So they are strengthening your hands. And tomorrow, if God forbids, if any non-compliance takes place and all, as a company secretary, you cannot take a shade under that look. I have not been empowered to do these things. मेरा कोई सुनता नहीं है, that you cannot say that. Now what happened is there is an obligation for you to report to the board. That's what I said, that there is an obligation on the board also to take your report because you are the report. One of the report is to the board directly. So it is the responsibility of the board also once in a while to check with its report is whether everything is going properly or not.
And if, as Sudhakar said, if you write in the board is aware, the process is written. So it become a dual responsibility, your responsibility as well as board responsibility. So carve out, it is the liberty, how it can be achieved, that you will be asked and you will be given opportunity to say what you feel. So that you work out in your organization through this amendment. That is a suggestion. It's
In fact,
on
this
you
is
how to take it up.
regulation 6. In fact, Deepti, regulation 6 is going to save the compliance officers and the company secretaries. It is like a savior, in fact, you can say that.
One, because responsibility is there. Boss, you will be questioned and you will be asked, so why can't you give the right that they are giving you? Position and they are recognizing.
Yeah.
What is the frequency of the conducting the audit committee meeting in case of the unlisted public company?
The unlisted public company section 177 has given its responsibilities. The terms of reference to the audit committee, they are there. So, and the Companies Act, if I'm not wrong, nowhere they mentioned about the how many meetings of the audit committee has to take place. It is not mentioned, but it has given the responsibilities to the audit committee. It is up to the audit committee how many times they want to meet.
As and when.
If it is an unlisted company.
Somebody has put income could be PAT. I don't think it is correct. PAT is actually profit after tax. We discuss enough on income and turnover, etc. And I think so. My current secretarial audit firm is currently completed 2 years tenure. Can I take the appointment for 2 terms of 5 years again in the next AGM? I think you said
Yes.
it's possible.
Prospective regulations.
Can you please clear who comes under one level
Enough.
below the board. I think we discussed this enough.
Enough. No more question on one level.
Now, we clarify that only remuneration payable to the promoter and the promoter group requires approval of the audit committee. Does it mean that I have to take approval of the audit committee immediately for any remuneration payable to promoter group from 12th December 24 for financial year 24-25?
Remuneration approval was already there. The provision was already there.
Yeah. Take next.
Executive director appointment is actually mandatory under regulation 17 as the word shall is actually written. Sorry, sir, it does not talk about just reporting to the board for LODR. I'm not able to get what it is.
Yeah.
What if we do approval of the executive directors on the board and appoint CEO as per the section 203 for day-to-day affairs and designate him as a KMP?
It says, what if we do not appoint executive director on the board and appoint CEO as per section 203 for day-to-day affairs and designate him as a KMP?
So see that a company is not mandated unless until you have that 196 requirements. You don't need to have a managing director or a whole-time director. So you can manage with a CEO, because see what happens is under 196 you don't need to appoint a managing director, but under 203 you may have to appoint a CEO.
Since the compliance officer is also a KMP, now as per the amendment. Yeah, that is right. That also we discussed actually. When a compliance officer has
See,
to
one minute, Bala. See, compliance officer by default he is not becoming a KMP. First of all, he has to be a KMP. Then he is qualified to be appointed as a compliance officer. So to appoint a person as a compliance officer, the prerequisites are he should be a qualified company secretary. He should be in the whole time employment of the company, and he should be designated as a key managerial person. Then only you can employ, and he has to report to the board directly, and he can be appointed as a compliance officer. So these are the prerequisites for that.
when a compliance officer has to report to the board, then any matter is actually reported to the chairman. Then it becomes the responsibility of the chairman to see that the matter is actually appropriately brought to the notice to the complete the board. No director should actually later report that he was not informed about this matter.
That's okay.
That is right,
See,
actually.
It is up to the chairman how he will handle the matter. It all depends upon the matter, whether he can resolve himself that issue, or if it is a one-to-one issue, then he has to just resolve between themselves. Every issue you don't need to bring it to the board, entire board. See, we have to also understand that the time of the board is very precious. So that is the reason actually why I was mentioning that administrative reporting of the compliance officer to be for anybody else. Because for everything he cannot approach the board, and board cannot look into the administrative related issues of the compliance officer.
Is a disclosure triggered under regulation 30 for change of the designation and SMP KMP is required to be reported? What is the implication of the change of SMP definition when it says include KMP example with the PIT regulations?
I couldn't understand the question actually. And in fact, I lost a track of this in the chat box also, because there are so many questions out there. I couldn't.
Is a disclosure triggered under regulation 30 for change in the designation of SMP KMP? I think senior management personnel to key managerial personnel. That's what he's talking. Is required to be reported. What is the implication of change of the SMP definition when it says it includes KMP? Example with the PIT regulations.
See, PIT regulations are different. listing regulations are different. The compliances are also different. Okay. So if one regulation says ki bhai, that the compliance officer is to be a KMP, that doesn't mean that other regulations also he has to be a KMP there. So as I mentioned that in case of insider trading regulations, the compliance officer need not be a qualified company secretary. Whereas in case of listing regulations, he has to be a qualified company secretary. Insider trading regulations, the compliance officer need not be a KMP even. So you have to see that what are the prerequisites to become a compliance officer under a particular regulation.
Changes in Regulation 17(1)(a) now actually mandated prior approval of shareholders or appointment of the directors who have actually attained the age of 75 years. This suggests that there is an ambiguity in the earlier regulations, as prior approval may not have been explicitly required. Consequently, several companies have actually been fined under this clause, and related cases are still pending in the Supreme Court. Given the track is clearly the earlier regulation, will the NSC consider refunding the fines imposed on these companies?
We can't discuss this on this platform, I think, but we should discuss on the amendments only, please.
Yeah, and I would like to clarify here that the views expressed here are my individual views, and they are not views of NSE in any manner whatsoever.
What a company has cut a company secretary and how
In fact, Prajakta, you did a good thing during the course. Otherwise, after the program is over, I thought of calling you and saying that in the beginning itself, always put this rider because it is to safeguard yourself.
Yeah.
When a company has a company secretary, and how now appoint another company secretary as a compliance officer, will the CSB actually absolved of by the liability of the non-compliance as a domain of the CS who are actually appointed?
See, according to me, the company secretary of the company, who is the key managerial person, under 205, he got the overall responsibility. So he cannot say that, look, I am not responsible for this. Same is the case with the board of directors also. The board of directors have appointed a compliance officer, doesn't mean they are abdicating. They can abdicate their responsibility. So what happens is that for certain things, you are appointing what's called exclusively specialist expert people to ensure the compliances. But ultimately, whoever is the person, the superior, he has to review the performance, review the compliances periodically. So in this case, maybe there is another company secretary who is also a KMP. Say, for example, joint company secretary, you can call. Designation wise, you may give anything. But that means what a company is having that two company secretaries. You are filing the DIR 12 form for both of them, designating them both as KMPs. And you are saying that when the time of his appointment or in the terms of appointment, you are writing that exclusively he is responsible for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whereas the other person is responsible for certain things. So in these two, what happens is one person might be a compliance officer only, though he is a qualified company secretary, whereas the other person, he is a company secretary of the company for the purpose of 205. So when you are appointing these people like this, you have to clearly demarcate what are their responsibilities, and certain things by default under the act or the regulations itself, they may be there, whereas certain things, it may not be so. According to me, the compliance officer who has been appointed under the listing regulations, he is the first line of defense. As far as suppose if any non-compliance takes place, he is the person who will be questioned. That doesn't mean the company secretary of the company can get away with that. He can always take a cover that, look, there is a specialist is there who has been entrusted with these responsibilities. But at the same point of time, he too has to keep his ears and eyes open. He cannot completely, what's called as say, I have nothing to do with this. Yeah.
See, now it is going to be 1 o'clock. We still have more 30 questions.
Let us take it quickly.
Okay. In subregulation 1 of the regulations 6, It is stated actually quarterly qualified.
The only thing is, you don't, if it is a question we have already answered, then don't take it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Qualified compliance officer, how can the provision? Yeah, we talked about the compliance officer, I think. Which committee will be responsible for the compliance officer's report? I think board is it actually. Who would be actually undertake the annual performance appraisals of the compliance officer pursuant the new regulation? Would it be the board, CFO, CEO, or any other executive director?
Same administrative matter and the responsibility, right? We mentioned that.
Does this mean a case of the retired by rotation also need the pass the resolution for 70 years?
Yes. Yes.
In
Appointment, reappointment, everything.
common understanding, it is actually acknowledged that the remuneration for the auditors is paid by the company being audited. It is also pertinent to note regarding the auditor's ability to issue adverse comments against the company for companies with a promoter holding at least 40%. It is generally understood that any resolution proposed in the annual general meeting will pass with this 40% support. However, why the recommended to seek shareholders' approval for the appointment of the secretarial auditor?
I couldn't understand the question.
Because he says the promoter is holding 40% of the share, and in the resolution they are having the majority shareholder, annual general meeting it is approved. So why it is again record the approval of the appointment?
Promoter may not be on the board. All this while, what is happening is the secretarial auditor was being appointed by the board of directors. And the promoter who is having 40%, 50%, whatever the controlling interest is there, he might not be casting his vote for the appointment of secretarial auditor because he might not be a part of the board, the promoter. Whereas now what is happening is the secretarial auditor's appointment is to be done by the shareholders. In fact, there was one anomaly also even under the Companies Act. If you see, the appointment of a company the secretarial auditor is to be done by the board of directors because the shareholders' approval is not mandatory. But if you see the MR3, they are reporting it to the shareholders. Always, actually, the person, if I am appointing somebody, that somebody has to report to me, not to my seniors or something like that. But anyway, that company said, okay, that is whatever it is there, it is there, it is happening like that. But in this case, what happens is that Sebi has realized the importance of the secretarial audit, and they have also given a message that to the, all the practicing company secretaries who are functioning as secretarial auditors, that look, I am elevating your position further. And because your appointment is to be done, I am equating your position like a statutory auditor of the company. You will also be appointed by, and rightly so. Actually, this is the right decision of SEBI, according to me. This amendment, whatever they have brought in, because secretarial auditors are also, if not the same, a notch above, it is not a notch below of the statutory auditor position. This is also a very important position, and that's why they said that secretarial auditors are also to be appointed by the shareholders. Their remuneration is also to be approved by the shareholders. And also they have decided the tenure of the secretarial auditors also 2 terms of 5 years each. After that, there should be a cooling period of 5 years. According to me, this is a very healthy proposition and a very welcome feature.
100% I'm in agreement with you, Sudhakar, because now there is a recognition as actually comes to the secretarial auditor as that of the statutory auditor. We are treated in par with other profession. That's what I would say actually.
Compliance and governance for the shareholders, their protection of interest, all this compliance. So we should be knowing, and they will be appointing who will be the secretarial auditor. And it is not easy to remove them or change the auditor. And they want that same security. Shareholders, who will get benefited most about compliance and governance? Shareholders. So that is the right they have been given.
And let me also say this thing, that earlier what used to happen was secretarial auditor appointment was not for a particular period. So it is to be normally done by year after year. Every year that board is to appoint the secretarial auditors. So that point of time, some people used to informally discuss with Meki Bhai that if we qualify the report next year, they may not even appoint us. What I used to say always that, look, as a secretarial auditor, you have certain defined responsibilities. Tomorrow, God forbids, if the regulator catch hold of you, how you will say that? But now what happens is this particular aspect has been taken care of. Your appointment is for a particular period, 5 years, and then second term of 5 years and all. So your hands have been strengthened, whether you are in service or whether you are in practice. The regulator has given enough strength, enough empowerment to discharge your the expected responsibilities, sir. Now it is up to us to rise to the occasion and to prove our mettle to the
Correct.
regulators.
They were always expected to attend AGMs also, secretarial
Yeah,
auditors.
correct.
That's a good step.
KMP director, promoter group, or any other person shall actually disclose the listed entity all information that is actually relevant and necessary to the listed entity to ensure compliance with the applicable laws. Do we need to take any separate disclosure on this annually? Directorship are usually disclosed in the directors by the KMP.
This is an ongoing obligation. This is not an annual or periodic thing. This is an ongoing obligation on all these people. It's an onerous responsibility. I don't think this is a paperwork that these people need to ensure. This is the regulation that I was asking attention to when we read Regulation 6, Regulation 5, the proviso that has been added.
Whether the appointment of the peer-reviewed secretarial auditor mandatory for SME companies.
I don't think there has been any clarity on this. Ashwini?
Listed entities is mentioned. There is no.
Yeah.
Nowhere it is mentioned, actually, we are not clear on this.
Yeah.
Can complaints officer hold dual charge? Example, can CCO and CRO be the same person?
Can the compliance officer,
Hold
CCO
dual charge.
CRO.
like, what is the dual charge?
They are using short words CCO and CRO.
Chief Compliance and
This
Chief
is-
Risk Officer.
Can the one person be appointed as
See,
a CS?
1 minute. If I am not wrong, chief risk officer is not a recognized position neither under the Companies Act nor under the listing regulations. The statutorily recognized position is only the KMP, key managerial person, or the company secretary, because these are
some sectoral regulators do consider. Like,
that is different. That is different. I'm talking about Companies Act and listing regulations only.
yes.
So, for example, in case of banking companies or NBFC companies, RBI might have recognized them as a
Yes.
statutory position. It is different altogether. But
Yes.
since we are discussing these two acts only, which are
Yes.
interrelated,
Correct.
that the CRO as such is not connected with them.
Can one person be appointed the CS and CFO? Can CS of the subsidiary appointed the CS in the parent company where CS is CS in the subsidiary already?
See, you have to refer to 203, and there is some kind of a difference of opinion among the fraternity. Some people say by that you cannot hold dual position because it is a whole-time key managerial position, means it should be a whole-time CFO position or whole-time a company secretary position. And similarly, in 203, only one carve-out is given that he can be the KMP of one of its one subsidiary. So some people used to interpret that also by that, single you have to use as plural and all. Some people used to say he can be the KMP for subsidiaries. That is what some people interpreted. That is not a correct interpretation according to me. It should be for one more subsidiary. Now the whole time companies, that who is the company secretary KMP of the parent company, can he be the CFO of the subsidiary company? That is sometimes a question comes up, and according to me, because the KMP of the parent company can be the KMP of the subsidiary company, but they are not said he should be in the same position. So maybe you can take a liberty to that extent.
Sudhakar, anyway, coming to your point here, the CS and CFO, I also seen in many company they are holding the dual position. So far, regulator has not taken any action. It is there in some of the even the listed companies also. It is there actually. That is number one.
See, there also, Bala, one thing is there. There are some companies who has done CFO, CS and all. They might have designated the company secretary who is the KMP, one X person. Another person might be a CFO on this thing. As far as the company side is concerned, when they are filing with DIR 12, they might have filed it differently. And when they're using the designation, they might be using it differently. Unless until we know that on what basis they have done it, we can't comment about it. But in general, this is what I'm saying. This is what the fraternity takes a call. But yes, there are some exceptions out there. And they might have taken some kind of a legal opinion or whatever it is. And all, as you rightly said, so far, even the regulator has not taken any action. So till such time, if one wants to take a chance, they can by all means.
In fact, when it comes to the subsidiary also, I have seen the company secretary has been appointed as the 1+5 subsidiaries also. In fact, he was holding the position a very long time, but there is nothing has come back from the regulatory. They actually interpret in the plural. In fact, there was legal opinion was there with the company.
Whatever regulator has not taken any action doesn't mean regulator is approving that. A regulator will take action at the right time. Say, for example, several, as I used to say always, 188 ordinary course of business. Several people say, I am taking this as my ordinary course of business. But tomorrow, when the regulator, God forbids, come for an inspection, that point of time, he may not agree with your this thing. So you have to be very careful when you're taking a call that it is in the ordinary course of business and arm's length and getting the exemption under 188. You have to do your homework properly.
And also, sir, whole-time employment of the listed entity, when they've used this word in Regulation 6, I don't think anywhere else they had used this word. Whole-time employment in LODR, I don't recollect if they have used anywhere else. Whole-time employment.
Even 203, it said that whole-time
but there the
person.
Correct. But
That's
that
why
was
their
under
secondment
Companies
is permitted there, Prajakta. Their secondment can happen.
But there, sir, it was MCA, the regulator. But here it is Sebi. So we have to understand the mentality of both the regulators separately.
Correct. I agree with you.
In addition to the above, the Companies Act, the age of restriction applies specifically to the executive directors and not to the non-executive directors. As Sudhakar sir was clearly mentioning about the Companies Act for 17(1)(a), please clarify.
17(1)(a).
Which is the question?
We are talking about two different provisions.
I think 75 years they are talking about, I think.
Yes, separate.
In addition to the above, the Companies Act, the age of restriction applies specifically for the executive directors and not to the non-executive directors.
But 17(1)(a) talks about non-executive directors only. Correct?
Only
17(1)(a) is only to non-executive directors.
The LODR can never be ultra-vires of the Companies Act. So how can it be? There are two different regulations. One is governed by the virtue of the contract, other is actually on the Companies Act.
I think as regards that not requirement of shareholders approval, no, we were discussing at that section. So
both of
the Companies Act it required, and they said that nominee director don't. In that regard, it is.
Okay.
We can go on.
What we understand, a nominee director on the board of the listed company to be appointed by the board only, no shareholder approval required. I think we discussed this enough actually. Nominee director is already completed from the shareholders approval. The Compliance Act is not amended to Regulation 17 is the same. Okay, this also we talked. What is the meaning of the part-time non-official director? This is seen in some of the PSU companies.
I think
non-official director.
It is not relevant also here in the amendment. Let's take next question, please.
As a corollary of all these changes, should legally be made in the Act against regulation of the LODR, otherwise leeway given in the LODR become in infrastructures. That way they are talking about that shareholders approval, I think so. But anyway, we talked about it. With the company law is there, company law, you have to be fulfilled with this. Even for the additional director approval to be taken within the maximum of 3 months.
Yes, because that is not changed. 1C1A has not changed.
How about compliance officer appointed as per the RBI? Will be KMP 2?
We clarified under Companies Act we are talking an LODR.
Can CS be on a listed company as a whole-time employee?
No, even if a compliance officer is appointed as per RBI, the board always has the ability to identify someone as KMP, and if they are identified as KMP, they will be categorized as KMP. So he can be.
Can the CS of the listed entity wholly employee the CS or subsidiary? I think we talked about that. In case of the ID appointed beyond 75 years for the first time, the jurisdiction should be given in the explanatory statement. So in case of the second time, there is a need to give similar justification about 70. You said actually it is one time
Yes, we
approval only.
discussed.
That we talked about it. Okay. Does it mean compliance officer not necessary to be a company secretary? That also we talked. First of all, he has to be a company secretary. Then only he can be a compliance officer. In amendment, the designation of the power of transfer of the securities committee and compliance officer or to the registrar to an issue and other share transfer agent has been actually deleted. Understand, the transfer is not actually applicable. However, in regulation 4011 it's mentioned.
Not relevant to the amendment, yes. This is for transposition, and they are telling authority with the board. This is not relevant to today's amendment topic.
Okay.
Next.
Please take all the amendments and question answer. Okay. Does it mean CS appointed under the company side we resign may not be reported to the have already? No, this also we talked enough, I think. KMP, that also we talked. Okay. This appointment of the compliance officer intended to strengthen.
Next.
Is there any change of appointment process, the qualification? That also we talked about it. Please explain in detail the requirement of the 30 read with the schedule 3 of the timing of 3 hours as an amendment made both requirement stating after the trading hours and before 3 hours of the trading hours on the same day.
You are telling that please explain in detail regulation 30, read with schedule 3 for the timeline of 3 hours as the amendment marks both the requirements stating after trading hours and before 3 hours of next trading day. So that confusion, they want clarity. What you also mentioned, no? Ashwini, that at 5:30 then.
So you can open that slide. No,
It appears to be, if it is the trading time, the information is to be disseminated immediately to the market. If the trading hours are over, they have given the flexibility to the board that it is not necessarily immediately 30 minutes. It can be late, but not later than 3 hours. That is what the flexibility they are given, I think, because when the trading time is over. That's what I believe.
Correct. So no, one thing I think we need to talk about is 3 hours before the next session. So in case the board meeting say concludes at 8 a.m. in the morning. Okay. The thing is that so suppose it concludes at 8 a.m. in the morning, we cannot disclose 3 hours before the timeline. Am I able to articulate? I am not able to articulate this example. If I have to give, after normal trading hours, but more than 3 hours before the next session. So the next session will start at 9:30, right? The trading session will start at 9:30. So before 6:30 a.m., the disclosure needs to go.
Anyway, we have to wait and see this one because normally, yeah.
Will you be able to?
So basically, I feel this amendment has come in to remove that stringent clause. So basically, the companies whose meetings end after the trading hours, they also have to do it within 30 minutes. To remove that ambiguity, it has been brought in and said that it can be done up to 3 hours. So if you're not, as I said, if it is happening after suppose 5:30 p.m. is your board meeting,
closure time.
It has to be done before 8:30 in the night.
But
correct.
what project
that is one understanding.
If the board meeting gets over in the morning at 8 o'clock, trading hours 9:30, then I think you have to follow with the 30 minutes only, not 3 hours.
Within 30 minutes, yes.
Within 30 minutes.
Yes.
That is within 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But suppose your meeting gets over on the next day, say 2 p.m. Then again it will be by 2:30 p.m. because during trading hours your meeting has concluded.
Correct.
Yes.
Another instance is suppose at 5 a.m. your meeting concludes.
I probably would presume trading hours on the day when it is actually completed, the meeting completes. After that, you have a 3 hours leeway. Otherwise, the 30 minutes will be there. That's what I think so.
Correct. But at any instance, it should be before 3 hours before the trading session starts. So before 6:30 a.m., you need to publish your results.
Yes.
The secretarial auditor, how it is currently PCS, can we appoint the 5 years? This also we talked about, I think. Then will 5 years appointment, that also we talked. Do the website disclosure is also required to be done by HVD listed entities? It is not equity listed.
Yes, it has to be done.
Video recording of the quarterly earning calls mandatory or optional? Till now, it was only a submit audio recordings.
Video recording is now it is to be submitted,
In case of the SME listed company, how the secretarial auditor is to be appointed as regulation 15 LBA are not applicable. As per the Companies Act, secretarial auditor is required to be appointed. Whether company continue to appoint the secretarial auditor through the board approval, example 1 year only, or is it mandatory 5 years appointment through the shareholders approval?
See, regulation, you have to see the applicability of regulation 24. If it is applicable to you, do it for 5 years. If it is not applicable to you, regulation 24 is not applicable to you, then you don't need to.
I think SME listed companies, things are not clear, I think. So it is not spelled
No.
out.
No, one thing, Bala, see, main board listed companies and SME listed companies, they know what is applicable to them, what is not applicable to them.
Correct.
So to my knowledge, regulation 24 is not applicable to SME listed companies. So if it is
Correct.
not applicable to them, then obviously this amendment is also not applicable to them.
Yeah, that's right.
And after some time, like some clarity will be issued by the regulator about applicability.
Sir, as I understand, the compliance officer just the bridge between the Sebi and the company. Is it nothing to do with the duties and responsibilities, which will not be shipped from the directors? There is one requirement of the disclose offerly RPT, and another side there is actually off-year definition omitted. Why it is so?
I think we answered this. This was answered.
The golden rule of the transaction with the RPT is one has to see one. That is the course of the ordinary course, and there's an arm's length. I think there's only a comment. For reclassification of promoter, is there any window available company to get their existing promoter reclassified as the public if they are meeting all the requirement prescribed? That is specifically in case of the where holding promoter reduced almost zero and is also converted under the investigation and company intent to distance itself from those promoters.
No such time limit is prescribed.
Can we get the percentage? Percentage is not available. Only recorded version is available. You can have it. You can access the recorded version the YouTube. A shareholder following promoter group exhausts the holding. Is it required to reclassify him?
See, these questions have nothing to do with the amendment, because
Actually, it's a practical.
so because of the time constraint, let us focus upon only the amendments related
Yeah, 30 minutes we talked about it. Omission of the disclosure and the certification of the regulation 39.3, 49.7.3 has been actually missed on this presentation. Please throw light on these amendments.
Which are the ones, Shani, what is this?
39.3, 49 and 7.3. The
Yeah.
timeline is to be prescribed. We spoke at the beginning of the presentation.
Okay. Elaborate on the record of the maintaining STD for the litigations.
I think those were covered. 39.3 was with relation to that, the book closure omission. So we have covered 39.3. Those kinds
CFO also qualified company secretary, can he appoint an interim company secretary?
Discuss this also.
Yeah, we discussed this. Further, why tax litigations have specifically excluded from the purview of the purview? Elaborate. I don't know. This is not these things. So current person who is more than 5 years before application, can he appoint at 5 years? That also we talked enough actually. Practically, appointment of the secretarial auditor is to be made before the end of the March 31, 2005, the next year, or can it be made thereafter?
What?
Practically, the appointment of the secretarial auditor is to be before March 31st, 2025 for the next year, or can it be made thereafter?
Can be made thereafter.
Can be
It is
at
for
the time of the
25,
AGM.
26.
See, as I mentioned that for the financial year 25-26 onwards, okay, the appointment has to take place at the AGM, for the AGM of 25.
Yeah,
There
that's
they have
it.
to appoint them for a period of 5 years.
MR3 is the part of the director's report. If secretarial auditor is appointed AGM, how he or she conduct audit before the AGM for financial year 24-25.
That is not the requirement.
Yeah.
It is for 26 financial year.
Do we also need to show CS reporting to the MD board under organization? This I think we talked about it. Okay. On the disclosure of the website, what document does the employer benefits scheme entail? Will it only the limits of ESOP scheme or anything more?
No amendment related. Go ahead next.
No, there is this
There is
employee
amendment
benefit
in the
scheme
ESOP.
disclosure is
Yes,
there
sir.
on
Achha,
Employee
website.
benefit scheme is required to be disclosed on the
ESOP
website.
schemes.
ESOP schemes. Or any other benefit scheme that you may have.
Yeah.
Right. It was in disclosure.
Yeah.
Is it good to identify the committee in which a compliance officer should report? No, compliance
So
officer
we
should
should
report
now
to the
skip
board. We
these
talked about
questions.
it.
We should skip these questions. We'll just take only relevant.
Can you clarify the reporting outcome of the meeting within 30 minutes? I think that also we talked about 3 hours, 30 minutes we talked about it. I agree with you, Sudhakar. CS many layers of the kindly. That also I think the comment only. For disclosure penalties, do we need to disclose penalties only which are actually pursuant the order passed by the regulatory or enforcement authorities? I think this is not the pertaining to the amendment. It's altogether a different question. Whether remuneration payable employee
I
in the
think Dimple's comment you need to read. Dimple Mehta has made a good comment, seconding Sudhakar sir's view. So that's a good comment. I think you can read that comment, Mr. Bala, if possible.
for disclosure of the penalties, we need to disclose the penalties only after the pursuant to the order. Okay. Whether remuneration payable to the employees listed company.
No. For Dimple is telling, I agree with Sudhakar that CS has many layers above him or her, and they are usually not allowed to show the picture to the board. CS are now being empowered to be fearless and be bold enough to directly present to the board.
Okay. Change in the regulation 17(1)(a) now mandate prior approve the shareholder appointment to the director who attained the, I think 75 years we talked enough, I think so. A company becomes wholly owned subsidiary company of the listed company by way of SPA. Do the existing RPTs, unlisted WOS require approval of the shareholder of the listed company, which actually triggers materially threshold RPT subsidiary company as per the regulation 23 on becoming the wholly owned subsidiary company, what stage if required that take the approval immediately after becoming the wholly owned subsidiary company or when exactly?
This already is given an exemption under the amendment, right, Ashwini? Under the
subsidiary
RPT
company,
amendment.
you
Yes,
the exemption, I think we talked
they have
about it in
given.
the beginning.
Yes, we have spoken about it. Yes.
Yeah. Now we need to hold 2 meetings on the ID, specifically agenda for year to make a meeting from 1 to 2. Yeah, that is the requirement is there. Can board composition be without executive director? No, again, Sudhakar said no. If the companies where the executive director is required to be appointed, it is required to be appointed. If it is not there, it is not applicable. We are encountered as a private company in the year 2014, and in 2023 we converted the private to public company.
It's for auditor. It is not. They are talking about statutory auditor. Not
Okay. Whether ED can also be a CFO? Yeah, if he is appointed, because within the executive director, one of them is appointed as the managing director. If that is the case, yes, it is. How to maintain the litigation dispute? I think we talked about it, I think. as a regulation 47 to the company just need to publish QR code and the details of the web page where the complete financial details of the listed entity or need to publish the financial results too. No, if the QR code is given, that is sufficient, I think. Unless until somebody requests it, you need not give. That's what the requirement. The whole idea, Sudhakar explained very clearly. In order to minimize the cost, this QR code facility has been brought in by the regulators. RBT under regulation 23 is applicable to SME companies. I think we talked on this also. But ICSI has already prescribed this, that the peer-reviewed firm can do the secretarial audit. Directors are usually disclosed the directors and KMP promoter group. What all the information do they need to disclose? No, this ongoing information requirement is there. No, you have to go by that. Can designate a SMPP a consultant role who is not the employee of the company? No, if you are talking about the compliance officer, it's a whole time in employment. That's what it is talked about it. Amendment on record date book closure by Sebi can be followed as per the Companies Act also. See, one thing is there, Companies Act and NODR regulation, there are two different things. You have to go what is applicable accordingly. You have to comply with the thing, whichever is stringent, you have to go by that. Can you please share your thoughts on the appointment of lead independent director? I think that is not the subject here. That's not the amendment here. If a PCS is acting in both capacities, secretarial auditor and a scrutinizer for the e-voting in AGM, he will be reporting to the e-voting result of one of the resolution. Will he report an appointment as a secretarial auditor? Whether there will be any conflict of interest.
See, in fact, if you see the amendment, they have mentioned that what are the other services a secretarial auditor can give. That SEBI is yet to come with that. Maybe they may allow, they may not allow. So we have to see that thing. As on date, the secretarial auditor can act as a scrutinizer also. There is no bar as such on that. But here in the amendment, they have clearly mentioned that SEBI is going to come with certain things what the other services a secretarial auditor cannot provide. Maybe they may prohibit to act as a scrutinizer.
In regulation 30, new proviso has been actually inserted requiring entities to be made in the SDD in the relevant information pertaining to the litigation and other than the tax litigation. Why such a requirement? Maintaining entity STD is actually linked to materially criteria treating the same in the unpublished price sensitive information.
That is not the topic. I mean, if you want to take
Okay. How to ensure that the promoter actually compliance office and the company secretary who is the KMP normally report to the MD or below the level, below board. Any change in the organization grade to be reflected in the any specific board approval is required. I think we talked enough on this. I think so. I think that is all. I am done with the questions here. All the questions have gone through. Now I think we are almost about 130, above 130. Still, would you like to invite any people raising the hands and answer? Dipti?
I think we should stop because the question will be one level below practically.
Yeah.
And that will be continuous question, and also trading hour will disclose that what is why, and there will be logic why this and all that. Because see, one thing we have to say that we have to discuss amendment, why they bring repeatedly, why they done, why they drop. We can think, but let's accept that this is amendment, we have to discuss that. So
I
many
think we will stop at this stage, I think so. Because
So,
it's already
still,
well over 130.
still I'll ask Project and Sudhakar. Shall we allow one of the person?
See, there are only two people who have raised their hands. One is Shilpi Shri and M. Shyamala. Let these two people ask the questions. That also briefly, only pertaining to amendments.
Yeah. Pertaining to amendments, please. Yeah. Please. IT, please allow them to speak. You can unmute and speak, please.
Quickly, whoever it is.
Shilpi Shri, talking permitted. Mr. Shyamlal, talking permitted. You can unmute and talk, please, both of you.
Are you all there?
Or by mistake they have done.
No,
May not
Shyamala
be
is
there
appearing
now.
here. I can see the name appearing here. Both the names are appearing actually on the board. Yeah. Are you
Selfie-
there, Shyamala? Selfie Sri? I don't think they are there.
I
Okay,
don't
that,
know.
that
Yeah.
was it.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I think we can close this session.
Yeah.
And friends, let's make it very clear. This was the opinion, understanding, discussion on our part as a individually, and as Prajakta very clearly mentioned that it is her personal view. Please understand that amendment has come. Everyone has their own way of interpretation. We try to discuss and understand as better. Intention is always to understand and clarify the doubts with more discussion. We hope that we add on to some knowledge on your part and some certain clarification, though every clarification add more confusion. That is also the true facts. But that lead to our journey for more discussion and more knowledge. With this, thanks a lot for your participation and wonderful attendance, more than 450. Thanks a lot for your participation. Thanks, Prajakta, for your time and your inputs. Thanks, Sudhakar, as usual, and Mr. Bala. And thank you, Ashwini, for wonderful presentation and your inputs. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks a lot to everybody. Ashwini, you have done a wonderful job actually putting everything together and, discussing instead of, listing separately and going it. You've given a very good presentation on this. Hats off to you. Thanks a lot to everybody. We close
I
with
second
this.
that.
We meet another session the next week.
Thank you, Prajakta.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah.